The temperature was still 103 degrees Fahrenheit when Melissa Duran vanished in the desert city of El Paso, Texas. Population over 670,000. On Friday evening, July 18, 2003, the dry air and dust blurred the neon lights along Montana Avenue. At 6:58 p.m., a convenience store camera captured the 27-year-old woman walking out with a bag in hand, the headlights of an unfamiliar car flashing across her face before she disappeared into the darkness. By 9:30 p.m., Melissa's phone was unreachable, and by midnight, the signal was gone entirely. 2 days later, her silver Toyota Corolla was found on a road leading to the Franklin Mountains. Doors locked, keys missing, her purse still inside. What happened in the 3 hours between the store and the desert darkness has haunted El Paso for 20 years since. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. On Friday evening, July 18, 2003, El Paso was steeped in the searing heat of the desert, the temperature still exceeding 103 degrees Fahrenheit, despite the darkening sky. The air was thick with dust and the smell of melting asphalt. Wind whipped through the neon lights on Montana Avenue, where bright glows reflected off greasy window panes. At 6:45 p.m., Melissa Duran clocked out at the Public Service Center. Her white shirt, sweat-stained at the wrists, hair hastily tied back. She drove her silver Toyota Corolla out of the parking lot, turned on the radio. Sheryl Crow's voice mixing with the howling wind. On her way home, she called her mother. "I'm stopping by the store near Montana Avenue. Don't wait for dinner." That was the last time Melissa's voice was heard. The convenience store's security camera recorded her walking out at 6:58 p.m., bag in hand, head slightly bowed to avoid the reflected sunlight. Headlights from a car parked across the street, sweeping across her face, making her eyes flash for a moment. The automatic door closed, the frame freezing on her back as she stepped out of view. Years later, that image became the last trace of Melissa. By 9:30 p.m., her phone stopped responding. Her mother called repeatedly, initially hearing the ringtone, then only a cold automated message. By 11 p.m., the signal was gone. Outside, the night wind from the desert rustled the palm trees, the distant hum of trucks echoing like the erratic pulse of someone waiting. At midnight, Mrs. Duran stood by the window, staring at the dark street, the porch light reflecting off a framed photo of her daughter in a green graduation dress. She tried calling once more, still silence. At 1:08 a.m., she picked up the phone and called the police, her voice trembling. "My daughter hasn't come home." On the other end, the dispatcher responded, "We'll be there right away." And they were. Hours later, as El Paso was still shrouded in dawn's mist and desert dust, the first engine sounds roared in the distance. 2 patrol cars with flashing red lights sped into the quiet residential area, their beams sweeping across faded yellow walls and the Duran nameplate on the front porch. Before the sun fully rose over the Franklin Mountains, the first police team arrived. Major Robert Salinas, head of the Missing Persons Unit, ordered a rapid response team assembled. The search officially began at 5:40 a.m., just 4 hours after Mrs. Duran reported her daughter missing. A FLIR helicopter took off from Fort Bliss, gliding through the air, its thermal sensor scanning the dusty fields and winding dry riverbeds east of the city. On the ground, El Paso PD patrol cars fanned out in a line, red lights sweeping across vacant lots, casting faint glows on rusted private property signs. They combed every road leading to Montana Avenue, where Melissa was last seen. By early morning, volunteers gathered at the Pebble Hills Community Center. Some held maps, others reflective tape, dividing the area by GPS grid. In the desert, footprints pressed into the dry sand. Hot wind kicked up dust, sticking to collars and stinging eyes. Radios crackled in the thick air, interspersed with short commands. Team A, check north. Team B, move toward pole 57. From a distance, the barking of K9 units, echoed then faded in the wind. No one spoke much. All were focused on the search. They overturned trash piles, inspected dry ditches, and checked low shrubs. An old shoe, some plastic bag scraps, a rusted beer can, nothing tied to Melissa. By noon, the temperature surpassed 108 degrees Fahrenheit. The air shimmered above the asphalt like a mirage. Sweat beaded on officers' collars, drying instantly in the wind. A young officer sat on a concrete step, sipped warm water, then stood again. They continued scouring roads, cross-referencing traffic cameras and convenience stores. The tech team scrambled to download data, but many cameras from that era only stored footage for 24 hours. Some had already been overwritten. The remaining clips were grainy, showing only car shadows and smeared lights. Meanwhile, beside a police SUV, Mrs. Duran stood motionless, clutching a printed photo of her daughter on A4 paper. Each time a patrol car returned, she looked up, hope flickering in her eyes before fading. She no longer cried, she just stared toward the desert, where the sun blazed blindingly. A rescuer offered water. She shook her head slightly. She wouldn't go this far, she whispered, her voice hoarse. In the afternoon, the search expanded to the newly built residential area on the eastern edge. A police team scoured abandoned parking lots, looking for skid marks or signs of a crash. On the sandy ground, tire tracks overlapped, but nothing stood out. A technician collected a soil sample, bagged it just to have something recorded. Another found a white nylon cord under a traffic sign, but it turned out to be stray packing material blown by the wind. Everything led to dead ends. On the second night, the search shifted to extended mode. Police floodlights swept across empty land, illuminating leaning utility poles. Radios and wind blended into a hollow sound, as if the desert itself was keeping secrets. K9 units paused, looking back at their handlers, detecting no human scent. The FLIR helicopter lowered its altitude for a final sweep. Thermal imaging showing only rocks and dust, no signs of life. On the third morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, the wind carried the smell of oil and damp sand. The search team held a quick briefing under a makeshift tarp. Maps were spread out, marked with red lines for areas already searched. Nearly the entire eastern city had been covered. Major Salinas sat quietly, staring at the map, spinning a pen, sweat dotting his forehead. He looked up at the team, his voice low. No tracks, no personal items, no witnesses. It's like she vanished in this desert. A young officer hesitated. Could she have left on her own, sir? Salinas looked out at the swirling red dust in the sunlight. No, he said slowly. Something's off. She didn't just disappear. On the fourth morning, as hope began to wane, an unexpected call came to the El Paso PD's coordination center. A man's tired voice trembled. I saw a car abandoned on Trans Mountain Road. Looks like it's been there a few days. It was a long-haul trucker, stopped to rest near a turnoff to the northern sandhills. Major Salinas immediately dispatched 2 units to the scene. Trans Mountain Road stretched across rocky hills, cutting through the Franklin Mountains like a gleaming scar in the sunlight. When the police arrived, the air held only wind and the fading hum of a truck. The silver Toyota Corolla sat tilted on the roadside, coated in thick dust, as if it had been there for days. The front tires were half buried in sand, the hood marked with handprints from someone closing it. Inside, the driver's seat was slightly reclined, Melissa's purse neatly placed on the passenger seat, wallet, lipstick, house keys, all intact, but no car keys. A forensic officer, gloved, peered through the dusty window. No signs of a struggle. The doors were locked. No scratches, no broken glass. They used a specialized tool to carefully unlock the car, preserving potential fingerprints. The smell of sun, dust, and musty fabric poured out. On the gear shift, a faint black stain, possibly oil or dried blood. A technician swabbed it, sealing it in an evidence bag. In the trunk, they found a gas receipt from a station on Highway 62, dated July 18, 7:12 p.m. The timing matched when Melissa left the store. One detail made Salinas frown. The gas station was over 10 miles northwest of her usual route, completely opposite her home. When the team used UV light, dozens of fingerprints appeared on the door handles and windows. Most matched Melissa's, cross-referenced with samples from her home. But on the rear right door, a distinct print stood out, thick, swirling ridges, larger than a woman's hand. Forensics photographed it, sealed it, and collected a DNA sample. They sent it to the city lab. Though everyone knew 2003 technology struggled to extract clear samples from sweat, dried on scorching surfaces. As they towed the car, desert dust swirled. An officer glanced at the thermometer reading 111 degrees Fahrenheit, forcing a smile. Only the desert keeps secrets this long. Salinas didn't respond. He stared at the map, red lines crisscrossing routes, and thought, why did she turn here? That afternoon, the Corolla was taken to the evidence lot. Technicians began a detailed inspection: fuel level, seat position, rear-view mirror angle. The driver's seat was pulled back farther than usual, suggesting someone taller than Melissa had driven. The rear-view mirror was tilted right. On the floor, dried red mud clung, the kind found in the Trans-Mountain area, but not in the urban zone where Melissa lived. A shoe print was cast in plaster, but it was too faint for comparison. In the glove compartment, they found an old parking ticket, a stack of music CDs, and a health insurance card. No trace of her phone. As the sun set behind the Franklin Mountains, the car sat silently in the impound lot, surrounded by yellow tape and blue-green LED lights. Salinas stood looking at it, hand on the hood, sweat dripping down his neck. He asked a technician, if someone took her, why leave the wallet and purse? The technician shrugged slightly. Maybe it was staged, or they didn't need the money. The answer didn't ease his mind. That night, the lab reported the unknown fingerprint had no match in the AFIS system. The DNA sample from the door handle was too weak to yield a profile. They stored it in a liquid nitrogen tube, labeled pending DNA tech advancement, their way of saying no hope yet. On the fifth morning, the sun rose, casting blinding white light across the rocky slopes north of El Paso. The barren land at the foot of the Franklin Mountains, where sand mixed with gravel and stunted cacti, became the new focus of the investigation. A forensic technician noticed something unusual in satellite imagery: parallel tracks, like tire marks, etched into the soft soil, stretching over 300 meters from the edge of Trans-Mountain Road into the wilderness. Salinas ordered the area sealed off immediately. Yellow tape stretched taut in the scorching sun, trembling in the wind, while in the distance, desert dust swirled into small columns before dissipating. A drone, remotely controlled, circled above, its camera sweeping the ground in a zigzag pattern. Images streamed to a monitor in the command vehicle. Amid the patchy sand, darker patches appeared, tire tracks clear, then fading, parallel, spaced exactly the width of a passenger car. The forensic team descended, carrying rulers, evidence bags, nitrogen canisters, and 3D imaging equipment. They moved slowly, marking each step to avoid disturbing evidence. Hot wind whistled through the mountain gaps, carrying a dry, rasping sound like sandpaper. An officer paused, pointing to a dark brown patch between the tire tracks. Could be oil, he said. But a quick test strip turned purple, reacting to proteins in blood. They gently scooped away the thin layer of sand, revealing a dark red stain, palm-sized, baked dry by the sun. Some had fused with the sand, forming a hard crust. A technician knelt, opened a toolkit, and used a ceramic knife to scrape off clinging soil, collecting fragments in a glass vial labeled Sample 14B. Another took close-up photos with specialized equipment, building a 3D model to pinpoint the exact GPS coordinates. Nearby, a young officer spotted something glinting in the sand, a gold teardrop earring with a small bead. He held it up to the light, its gold gleaming vividly against the dusty backdrop. Matches the kind Melissa wore, Salinas said, his voice hoarse. He recalled her file photo, a dark-haired girl with a shy smile, gold earrings glinting. That tiny piece of evidence felt like a fragment of memory left in the barren desert. Forensics began a meticulous collection process. A plastic frame was placed around the bloodstain, with north-south markers fixed in place. A camera scanned the scene, capturing every detail: sand color, track depth, light direction. Under a temporary canopy, a forensic expert mixed a hemoglobin analysis solution. It changed color on contact, confirming human blood. "Send it to the city lab now," the team leader ordered. A vial with the blood sample was sealed, placed in a cooler at 4 degrees Celsius. The earring was wrapped in an anti-static bag, sealed with a barcode. As the drone flew deeper, its camera detected small scratches on the ground, snaking erratically, possibly from something heavy being dragged. They logged all data, reconstructing a 3D terrain map on a computer. Each tire track, each drag mark, was numbered and flagged with small stakes. The temperature had climbed past 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Heat rose from the ground like fire, blurring vision. A technician collapsed from heat stroke, and teammates helped him to a vehicle. But no one wanted to stop. They knew this might be where Melissa was taken after vanishing. By afternoon, the wind shifted, carrying the smell of damp earth. A strong gust scattered the thin sand layer, exposing a small metal object, a bent hairpin, caked with dirt. Its red paint was chipped, but the metal remained intact. Salinas signaled for it to be photographed and collected. He stood still, scanning the desolate land of wind and rock. No body, no signs of life, only fragments telling an unfinished story. As the sun sank behind the Franklin Mountains, the team returned to the temporary base to review data. 3D images flashed on the screen: parallel tire tracks, the gold earring, the bloodstain like a droplet in the desert. The lab's preliminary report arrived that night. The blood was O+, matching Melissa Duran's medical records. No one spoke, only the hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. Major Salinas leaned back in his chair, staring at the printed photo on the desk. Earring, blood, tire tracks. The clues formed a trail, but led to nothing. He took a deep breath, his voice raspy. There's blood, her belongings, but no body. Outside, the desert remained dark and silent, as if it had witnessed nothing. 3 days after finding the Toyota Corolla, the El Paso PD's digital forensics team re-examined all security camera footage around Montana Avenue. The storage systems were patchy, many clips blurry or overwritten, but an old camera on a repair shop roof, just a few hundred meters from the convenience store, caught something crucial. At 6:59 p.m., Melissa's silver Corolla left the parking lot, slowly heading to an intersection. A few cars behind, a black Ford pickup appeared in the fading sunlight. It turned the same way, keeping a steady distance through 3 intersections. Zooming in, they saw only the front of the truck reflected in the light. The license plate was too sun-glared to read, except for the last 3 characters, 59X. The tech team enhanced and adjusted contrast, but couldn't identify more. Police cross-checked the database for black Ford F-150S in El Paso and nearby areas. Over 400 matched the description. The number disheartened the team. Salinas stared at the endless list on the digital board, shaking his head. If he's not in this list, it's a stolen truck. But no theft reports from that week matched. While data was analyzed, investigators met the only person who might have seen Melissa that night, the convenience store's evening clerk. The young woman, Sofia Torres, recalled she bought a bottle of water and some snacks. While ringing her up, I saw a man outside, wearing a red cap, staring through the glass. Sofia said he didn't come in, just leaned against a pole, hands in pockets, tall, with broad shoulders. When Melissa walked out, he watched her, then got into a black car parked nearby minutes later. He was talking on the phone, his voice different, not local, maybe Midwestern, a bit drawn out. Police showed her sample ID photos, but Sofia shook her head. I didn't see his face clearly, just his eyes, like someone waiting for the right person. Based on her description, they sketched a suspect, light-skinned man, about 40, red cap, short-sleeved shirt. The sketch was sent to nearby precincts, but no one recognized him. A week later, the team searched parking lots around Trans Mountain for a black Ford pickup, ending in 59X. They noted dozens of similar plates, but they were either sold to another state or misregistered. No leads panned out. The media began buzzing, El Paso woman mysteriously vanishes, car abandoned, on Mountain Road. Local stations aired Melissa's image non-stop, her shy smile from a graduation photo, alongside the silver Corolla. Reporters swarmed her mother's house, cameras casting harsh white light on the exhausted woman's face. Salinas dodged the press, stating briefly, "We're doing everything we can." But 3 days later, with no new evidence, the coverage dwindled, then vanished from evening news. The media shifted to a downtown bank robbery, leaving Melissa to a few lines in the missing persons section. Inside the PD headquarters, whiteboards were scrawled with arrows and evidence photos. At the center, the black Ford truck was circled in red. Salinas stared at it, then turned to a young investigator. If he knew her, why wasn't he recognized? And why didn't he cover the car's tracks? No one had an answer. A week later, the team retraced the route from the store to the car's location, moving slowly, mile by mile, comparing traffic data. At an intersection near Highway 375, an overpass camera caught the evening traffic of July 18th. But the footage was blurry and shaky from the wind. In 10 seconds of video, they saw the Corolla flash by, but the black pickup was obscured by a truck behind it. The trail ended there, as if the black truck melted into the desert darkness. 2 weeks after Melissa Duran's disappearance became the El Paso PD's focus, every lid circled back to one question: who was the last person to see her alive? Pressure from the media, family, and within the force kept the investigation alive. Major Salinas ordered a review of Melissa's closest relationships. First on the list was David Ramirez, her ex-boyfriend, a refrigeration technician who dated her for nearly 2 years. David was summoned to the station Monday morning, his face sallow from sleeplessness, hands trembling slightly as he signed the DNA consent form. He said they broke up over 4 months earlier because Melissa wanted to focus on work and getting a professional certification. He hadn't seen her since their argument at a coffee shop near Pebble Hills. Asked where he was on July 18th, David said he was working a night shift, repairing air conditioners at a warehouse in the South Industrial area. Police verified he signed in from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. with a supervisor's signature. Warehouse cameras showed him moving between aisles. A coworker confirmed he never left that night. A perfect alibi. David's DNA was compared to the Toyota's evidence. Negative. No match. Salinas wasn't relieved or disappointed. He just nodded, jotting a brief note in the report. Not involved, but deep down he knew ruling out the ex-boyfriend only made the case feel emptier. After that, investigators turned their attention to Melissa's workplace, the El Paso County Public Service Center, a drab, gray building, as lifeless as the administrative work inside. There, police quickly zeroed in on a man named Thomas Green, Melissa's direct colleague. Office whispers suggested tension between them after Melissa reported him to superiors for verbal harassment during work hours. Green, 42, had been temporarily suspended 2 weeks before her disappearance. When questioned, he tried to keep his voice steady, but his eyes blinked rapidly. "I didn't do anything to her. She made it up. That night, I was home with my wife, watching the game." Green's wife confirmed he was home, but her voice carried hesitation. Police obtained a warrant to search Green's pickup truck. In the trunk, they found a few strands of hair on a rubber mat. The samples were sent for testing, along with DNA from Melissa's fingernails for comparison. Results: no match. No evidence tied Green to the case. A quick meeting was held in the command room, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and damp paper. The whiteboard was covered with notes, arrows, and enlarged photos of Melissa and the black Ford truck. Everything circled back to square one. A young investigator whispered, "No motive, no witnesses, no body." The words fell into the room like a pebble dropped in a dry well. No one responded. August passed, and the press stopped asking questions. TV stations moved on to new cases. The police no longer received funding for the search, but for Salinas, Melissa's case was never over. He kept her file in the right drawer of his desk, under an old lighter. Many nights, he stayed late, flipping through photos, rereading reports. On the screen, the black Ford pickup appeared, hazy in the sunlight, its 59X license plate like a code. He zoomed in, trying to make out a small tattoo on the driver's wrist, a black-edged triangle, like a symbol from a club or old unit. No Texas database recorded a matching tattoo, he jotted in his notebook. Possibly a veteran. Maybe a mechanic. Maybe someone who knew her. But it was all guesswork. Not enough for an arrest warrant. Not enough for an interstate investigation. All physical evidence, from fingerprints to blood samples to hair, was too sparse or too faint to conclude anything. In early 2004, Melissa Duran's case was officially classified as pending investigation, on hold, but not closed, with no resources to continue. The file was labeled red and stored in the evidence vault alongside dozens of other unsolved cases. Yet, for those who touched the case, the memory lingered. A forensic technician who collected samples in the desert said she still dreamed of the gold earring glinting in the sand. Salinas kept driving by Montana Avenue after shifts, stopping at the old convenience store where the camera last captured Melissa. He'd turn off the engine, stare through the dusty glass, picturing the young woman walking out, bag in hand, headlights sweeping across her face. Then he'd quietly drive away. The case paused, but the obsession didn't. It clung silently to everyone involved, like desert dust, invisible but ever-present in the air. In 2005, a brief memo landed on Major Salinas's desk. 8 words, cold and curt. Case #03147, transferred to cold case. The signature below was from the El Paso police chief. After nearly 2 years of investigation, with no new viable evidence, Melissa Duran's case was officially shelved as awaiting review. No suspects, no motive, no body. Only sealed evidence bags remained, along with the fading memories of those who once believed they could find the young woman in the Franklin desert. The evidence room sat in the basement of the old PD headquarters, where pale fluorescent lights bathed rows of iron shelves packed with paper boxes. Each box bore a case number, year, and note. A single surveillance camera swept the aisles. When a clerk carefully placed the Duran Case 2003 box on the third row, the handwritten black marker label smudged slightly from sweat. No one noticed that the small box would sit untouched for nearly 2 decades. Inside, a gold earring, a gas receipt, sealed soil samples, and a CD with crime scene photos. All were resealed with police tape, bearing Salinas's signature and the stamp evidence sealed. For the police, it was a failed missing persons case. For the Duran family, it was a wound that never healed. Every year on July 18th, Mrs. Duran and a few relatives drove to the desolate land near Trans Mountain Road, where her daughter's car was found. They set up a small wooden marker, placed white daisies, and lit candles. Desert wind whipped the flames, curling smoke into the dust. Sitting by Melissa's photo, her vibrant smile worn by years of sand and wind, Mrs. Duran whispered, "Just let me know where you are." In the city, the disappearance faded from memory. Search volunteers moved to new units, retired, or took on other cases. Montana Avenue changed. The convenience store became a fast food joint, the old camera removed, the sign replaced with a new logo. No one spoke of the young woman who vanished. One El Paso summer night. Only stacks of files remained in metal cabinets, each name an unfinished story. Salinas retired in 2008. On his last day, as he cleared his desk, an old lighter fell out with a crumpled note. Black Ford, plate 59X, triangle tattoo. He kept the paper in his wallet, a reminder of the case he couldn't solve. Driving past the Franklin Mountains, he still glanced at the sandy expanse, where the drone once scanned. In his mind, he could still hear the young officer's whisper, "No body." Years passed, and like other unsolved cases, Melissa Duran's file sank into obscurity. On Texas Cold Case Registry, it was one line among thousands: female 27, missing from El Paso, last seen July 18, 2003. No photo, no details, no updates. Even the case number changed with the digital system. 03147 became TX EP 20030718. But for the Duran family, the memory stayed vivid. The mother, her hair now gray, kept the same phone number, fearing she'd miss Melissa's call. She left her daughter's bedroom untouched, the pillow, wall photos, and faded perfume scent unchanged. Each year on Melissa's birthday, she baked a cake, lit an extra candle, and waited for a doorbell that never rang. In 2013, El Paso PD moved the evidence vault to a modern facility. As workers transferred hundreds of case boxes, they inventoried each one. A young clerk paused at Duran Case 2003, reading the name silently, then asked the supervisor, "Why isn't this marked closed?" The older man replied, "Just missing, no body, no suspect. It'll stay here until someone wants to reopen it." They loaded the box onto a cart, placing it on a new shelf. Another layer of dust settled over the old. 10 years later, El Paso had changed. But the story of the girl who vanished without a trace remained a whisper among law enforcement. Occasionally, criminal justice students sought out the retired Salinas to hear about Melissa's case. He'd say briefly, "Everything was right there, but we couldn't see it." By 2015, Melissa Duran's case reached its 12th unsolved year. Her name remained on the state's missing persons list, updated periodically with emotionless computer entries. In the vast evidence vault, the Duran Case 2003 box sat unmoved, silent as a grave. In the Franklin Desert, wind still blew across the sandy spot where the gold earring was found, small, glinting, persistent like an unending cry for help. In March 2020, El Paso entered an unusually hot spring, and in a small third-floor room at the police department, a new team was formed after nearly a decade's pause. Lieutenant Carla Mendez, a 40-year-old woman with neatly tied hair and a measured voice, was tasked with leading the cold case unit, reviewing long-dormant unsolved files. A former criminal investigator specializing in DNA evidence, she knew the weight of unresolved cases. Her desk was piled with yellowed folders, one labeled in smudged black marker, Duran Case 2003. Opening the first page, dust rose, the musty smell of old files evoking a city's lingering wound. She read every line, every report. A young woman missing since 2003, her car abandoned, DNA traces too faint to identify. Blood type O+, sample insufficient for sequencing. Cold, brief words, but behind them, an unfinished story. Mendez looked out the window at the sunlit parking lot and said softly to her assistant, "We start here." When the team formed, the city allocated funding for 4 initial test cases. They chose files with the best preserved DNA samples. Melissa Duran stood out because the door handle swab remained sealed in the evidence vault. Mendez personally went to the basement, where hundreds of boxes sat under pale fluorescent lights. The vault keeper opened a steel door, pulling out the dusty paper box labeled "Evidence Sealed, Duran Case 2003. Wearing gloves, she carefully broke the seal, revealing plastic bags, the earring, gas receipt, soil vials, and finally, the swab with sweat traces from the door handle, deemed insufficient DNA in 2003. Now, technology had advanced. Othram Labs in the Woodlands, Texas, had announced a special program with law enforcement forensic genealogy, using genetic ancestry to identify unknown individuals or suspects through relatives' DNA. With next-generation sequencing, a few cells could yield a complete genetic profile. Mendez knew this was their chance. She assigned technicians to restore the sample. The process took 3 days in a sealed room with air filtration and a steady 10 degrees Celsius. Using ultra-clean extraction, they gently separated dried skin cells from the swab, filtering them through an enzyme solution to recover degraded DNA. Under a microscope, tiny white strands gleamed like specks of dust. A technician glanced at the screen, whispering, "The nucleus might still be intact." Mendez watched, arms crossed, eyes focused. After 48 hours, they extracted enough DNA for a sequence profile. The sample was coated, sealed in a cryotube, labeled MD03, Restored Sample 2020. Mendez signed the paperwork, sealed it, and prepared it for air transport to Othram Labs. She knew they were venturing into uncharted territory for El Paso PD. Before leaving, she looked at the old evidence box. 17 years untouched. One small mistake could send it back to zero. The next morning, the sample box was placed in a nitrogen-cooled container, hand-delivered to an armed courier. Destination: The Woodlands, Texas, nearly 700 miles from El Paso. On the shipping form, the final line was typed in bold, "Cold Case DNA Analysis Request, Forensic Genealogy Study." 3 days later, an email confirmation arrived from Othram. Mendez opened her laptop, reading, "Sample received in good condition. Whole genome sequencing initiated. Preliminary results expected in 10 days. She exhaled, leaning back. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, Melissa Duran's case might move forward. While waiting, Mendez studied cases solved by forensic genealogy. The Golden State Killer, Fort Worth Jane Doe. She meticulously noted how suspects were traced through relatives on GED match. If Melissa was murdered, she told her team, "Her killer is still among us. His DNA, or his family's, will betray him." A week after sending the sample, Lieutenant Carla Mendez received an email from Othram Labs titled, "Preliminary Genealogy Match Report, Duran Case." She opened the file, the first line making her heart race. Genetic profile successfully reconstructed, 3.2 billion base pairs mapped. For the first time in 17 years, the anonymous DNA trace from the Toyota Corolla's door handle had a clear form, a complete genetic profile, enough to trace its origins. The accompanying report from Othram's analyst stated, "Sample is male, 97.8% confidence, error margin under 2%. Profile uploaded to GED Match Pro for cross-referencing with public databases." This was a genetic database where millions of Americans voluntarily submitted their DNA to trace ancestry or relatives. For investigators, it was the most powerful tool yet to crack cases thought lost forever. 3 days later, the first hit appeared. A profile with 0.9% similarity, indicating a shared ancestor about 4 generations back, was found from a woman named Catherine Hall, living in Las Cruces, New Mexico, just over 40 miles from El Paso. An American of Irish descent, she uploaded her DNA to GED Match in 2018 to trace her lineage. Not a direct match, an Othram expert said in a video call, but enough to build a suspect genealogy tree. The Mendez collaborated with Othram's forensic genealogists. Using specialized software, they combined census records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, and public data. Distant relationships branched out, splitting further. On the screen, a massive genealogy tree emerged, spanning over 200 individuals across New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, and Oklahoma. The process was like excavating a family's genetic history. Experts filtered for males aged 20 to 45 in 2003. When Melissa vanished, the data narrowed. One surname stood out with suspicious overlaps: Harlan. The Harlan family originated in southern Arizona, with branches migrating to New Mexico in the 1980s. One branch included a man with a 1999 assault conviction in Tucson. Jeffrey Harlan, a mechanic, sentenced to probation for attacking a woman in a parking lot, then vanishing from civil records. His DNA wasn't in the CODIS criminal database, as sampling wasn't mandatory for his offense then. But in the genealogy tree he fit perfectly: Catherine Hall's nephew, tied to the initial DNA match. They expanded the data, sifting through residency records in El Paso and nearby areas from 2000 to 2004. Only 3 Harlans lived or worked within 50 miles of Melissa's disappearance. 1. Darren Michael Harlan had registered a temporary address in Socorro, an El Paso suburb, in June 2003, just a month before Melissa vanished. He worked temporarily for a local transport company, driving a black Ford F-150 pickup. But for Mendez, a single genetic profile wasn't enough. She needed solid evidence for a search warrant. Othram offered to generate an extended genealogy report, a genetic map detailing Darren Harlan's ties to relatives with public DNA. When completed, it spanned over 70 pages, detailing distant cousins in Louisiana and every marriage connection. When the genetic report arrived from Othram on a Monday morning, a new name emerged on the first page: Jacob Harlan, 45. A mechanical engineer at Union Pacific's railcar maintenance yard in El Paso. He belonged to a second Harlan branch, directly related to Darren M. Harlan, the man whose DNA matched the sample from Melissa's car door handle. Mendez reread the name, her nerves taut. Othram's final report concluded, 99.2% probability the DNA belongs to Jacob Harlan or his son. Born in 1978, Jacob studied mechanical engineering in Albuquerque before moving to El Paso for work. DMV records showed he lived in Horizon City, just 6 miles east of Melissa's home. An old traffic police record silenced the team on July 18, 2003, at 7:12 p.m. Just over 20 minutes after the camera captured Melissa's final image, Jacob Harlan was ticketed for speeding 15 miles per hour over the limit on Montana Avenue. The ticket, signed by Sergeant Don Phillips, noted the location as the intersection of Montana and Chelsea, matching the direction Melissa drove from the store before vanishing. A coincidence too striking to ignore. Lieutenant Mendez reopened the entire 2003 case file. In the old reports, a note mentioned that an unidentified driver was stopped by police near the disappearance scene, but deemed unrelated. Back then, investigators had no idea that driver was Jacob Harlan. 17 years, and that name was right in front of us, Mendez said softly, almost a whisper. Immediately, the cold case team planned covert surveillance. El Paso PD coordinated with the local FBI branch, assigning 2 undercover agents to monitor Jacob's home in the Vista del Sol suburb. The single-story gray house had a 2-door garage and a wooden fence out back. Each morning, Jacob drove a 2002 black Ford Ranger, the same model and color as the pickup following Melissa in the store's camera footage. Mendez ordered the tech team to check the license plate, TX759X, 1 digit off from the 59X, captured in the blurry 2003 footage. However, old DMV records showed Jacob had changed his plate in 2006. One morning, as Jacob left home at 6:40 a.m., agents noted he wore a red Texas Rangers cap. The detail the 2003 witness described as a man in a red cap, non-local accent. The pieces were falling into place, cold and clear. During the first week of surveillance, Jacob lived a perfectly normal life. He went to work at the rail yard, came home on time, and fished at Ascarate Lake on weekends. No suspicious behavior, except his habit of leaving home at midnight, driving around the Franklin Mountains where Melissa's blood and earring were found. When tailed, he'd stop, smoke, stare silently at the desert, then return home. Mendez sensed something off, as if he was checking to ensure a secret stayed buried under that sand. She reviewed his criminal record. Jacob had no arrests, only minor traffic violations and a small bar fight in Tucson in 2001. But a former colleague's statement caught her attention. Jacob had sudden bursts of anger, especially if someone touched his truck. Union Pacific records noted a 3-day suspension for striking a coworker who used his tools. He's meticulous, precise, almost obsessive about control, his old supervisor wrote. Mendez noted, control tendency fits a kidnapping profile. On October 12, 2021, El Paso PD secured a technical surveillance warrant, cameras outside Jacob's home, and a GPS tracker on his Ford Ranger. Simultaneously, Mendez requested a warrant from Texas Forensics for biological waste collection. 3 days later, the team retrieved a soda can and cigarette butt Jacob discarded in his trash. When the cigarette butt's DNA was analyzed, it matched the sample from Melissa Duran's car door handle with 99.99% certainty. The moment Mendez received the report, she sat in silence. Everything she'd read for months, genealogy, data, maps, notes, now had concrete biological evidence. But for an arrest warrant, they needed a second sample, taken directly from a personal item, to avoid legal disputes. On day 27, Jacob switched to night shifts. While he was at work, agents gained 12-minute access to his apartment, using a legally copied key under the surveillance warrant. Wearing nitrile gloves, they scanned the sink and kitchen with UV light. In the bathroom, they found a blue toothbrush, bristles worn, dried toothpaste at the base. It was collected, sealed in a bio-insulated bag, labeled SV27A. When the team left, no trace remained. Everything was back in place. The toothbrush DNA was rushed to Othram Labs and the FBI forensic unit for parallel testing. Results came 48 hours later, at 2:17 a.m. Mendez was in the van when the email arrived, the screen's glow lighting her tense face. Result: full autosomal STR match, probability of identity 1 in 2.4 quadrillion. Source: Jacob Harlan. A perfect match, it could only be him. Inside the van, silence held. Only the soft hum of the AC and blinking monitor lights broke it. After nearly 2 decades, Melissa Duran's case had its perpetrator. Mendez called the federal prosecutor in El Paso, presenting the evidence chain, DNA matches, genealogy data, the 2003 traffic report, and the Ford Ranger footage. The 500-page dossier, each page numbered and sealed, was sent to the Western District of Texas Federal Court. A 2-decade investigation now reached a tipping point, the line between patience and justice. That afternoon, Arrest Warrant 23001A was signed. Mendez held the thin paper, feeling it could crumble if gripped too hard, yet it carried a family's 20-year weight. "Time to bring her home," she said softly, folding the file. At dawn on January 10, 2023, Tucson was gripped by biting cold. The temperature dropped to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Desert fog, blanketing parked cars outside 4125 East Speedway Boulevard. Since 4 a.m., over 20 FBI agents and El Paso PD support had surrounded the area, equipped with bulletproof vests and shoulder-mounted body cams. After nearly a year of surveillance, it all came down to a few fleeting minutes. Lieutenant Carla Mendez sat in the command vehicle, peering through fogged glass. On the screen, live drone footage showed the target, Jacob Harlan, 45, turning on his apartment's ground floor light. He was preparing to leave, wearing a dark green jacket and the red cap, same as in the 2003 footage. 2 decades, Mendez murmured, and he still keeps that habit. At 4:42 a.m., he opened the garage, started the black Ford Ranger, its taillights casting a red streak through the fog. The SWAT team moved into position. 2 unmarked SUVs blocked the alley's ends. Over the radio, the team leader's voice crackled. Team A, approach. Team B, cover. Prioritize civilian safety. Jacob stepped out, holding a paper coffee cup. In an instant, 3 black armored figures rushed forward. An agent shouted, "FBI, don't move, drop the cup, hands up." Jacob froze, flashlights blinding his face. For a moment he didn't react, only squinting slightly, like someone waking from a long dream. Then he smiled, a dry, brittle smile, and said in a low, raspy voice, "After 20 years, you still haven't forgotten." Mendez approached, her long coat swaying in the wind, badge glinting under yellow light. She met his gaze, replying calmly, "No, Jacob. There's one person we haven't found." An agent cuffed him, the metal clicking softly in the quiet. Body cam footage captured it all. Jacob's white breath, dewdrops on the hood, his hands raised behind him without resistance. The body cam showed Mendez's face, eyes sharp under her cap, voice firm. "You're under arrest for federal kidnapping and first-degree murder in connection to the 2003 disappearance of Melissa Duran." Jacob turned, staring into the body cam lens, his gaze hollow as a mirror. For a moment he muttered, "I knew this day would come." At 4:55 a.m., he was led from the complex. The garage door stayed open, apartment lights flickering. Neighbors, woken by the noise, peeked through curtains. Red and blue police lights flashed on white walls, illuminating the quiet street. A middle-aged woman on a second-floor balcony asked, trembling, "What's happening?" An agent replied curtly, "El Paso cold case, ma'am. We've waited too long for this." By 6 a.m., the convoy left Tucson for El Paso. Mendez sat in the back, facing Jacob. He was silent most of the way, asking only once, "What did you find, besides my name?" She looked at him, answering briefly, enough to end 20 years of silence. In the rearview mirror, his eyes showed resignation, not anger, not fear, but relief, as if he was finally free from hiding. As the convoy crossed the state line, the sun rose. Light spilled over the vast Franklin desert sands, where years ago, a gold earring and bloodstain were found, the case's first clues. In El Paso, the news exploded, shaking the community. Local stations blared. El Paso cold case cracked after 20 years. FBI arrests suspect in 2003 disappearance of Melissa Duran. Social media erupted with thousands of shares, residents recalling faint memories of the 2003 disappearance, the young woman lost in a summer night, flyers once plastered on Montana Avenue's lampposts. The Duran family was notified by police before the media broke the story. Melissa's mother, now in her 60s, said only one thing when Mendez delivered the news. "Thank you for not giving up." The El Paso Times ran a front-page story. "Justice at last for Melissa Duran." A 2003 photo of the 27-year-old in her work uniform appeared, captioned, "After 2 decades, an arrest gives hope that the desert will finally give up its secrets." That evening, as news outlets replayed footage of agents escorting Jacob Harlan under flashing police lights, Carla Mendez stood alone in the PD's rear parking lot, gazing at the Franklin Mountains cloaked in darkness. Desert wind carried a dry chill and the metallic scent of sand. In that moment she felt a strange calm, satisfaction mixed with weight. The case wasn't closed, no confession yet, no body found, but the wheels of justice had begun to turn, unstoppable. Night gave way to dawn. El Paso woke to the gray light of a winter morning, and at the police headquarters ground floor, a small interrogation room was ready. White light glared on a metal table, reflecting a plastic water bottle at its center. Outside, wind whistled through shutters, carrying fine desert dust into slivers of light. The wall clock ticked to 9 a.m. Jacob Harlan had been there over 6 hours. Uncuffed, no lawyer, just a tired, vacant stare at the wall ahead. The door swung open. Lieutenant Carla Mendez entered, followed by the federal prosecutor. She set down a thick file, pages neatly numbered. The dry sound of paper on metal cut the silence. Mendez pulled a chair, sat across from him, voice low and steady. "We've been here 6 hours, Jacob, no menace. Just patience, and the exhaustion of 20 years awaiting answers." He didn't respond, sitting upright, hands clasped, head slightly bowed. Mendez signaled the technician to turn off the secondary security camera, keeping only one lens recording the full scene. She opened the file, sliding the first page toward him, the DNA match report. "This is from Othram Labs, the Woodlands, Texas," she said evenly. "DNA from the Toyota Corolla's door handle matches samples from your toothbrush and soda can. Probability of coincidence, 1 in 2.4 quadrillion." Jacob looked up, his eyes showing a flicker of reaction for the first time. Not fear, but a faint smile, like someone who'd anticipated this. "I knew this day would come," he said softly. "Just didn't think you'd be this persistent." Mendez kept emotion at bay. She continued, flipping pages, traffic ticket, Ford Ranger photos, Genealogy report. Camera stills. You were stopped on the same road Melissa vanished. You drove a matching truck, same color, same time. Your DNA was on her car's door handle. Jacob sighed softly, tilting his head, eyes on the table. I'm not denying it, he said, voice steady as cold iron. I stopped to talk to her. The room seemed to hold its breath. Mendez gripped her pen, staring at him. Say that again. What did you stop for? Her car was having trouble. The temperature light was on. I thought I could help. I just stopped. Talked. His voice didn't waver, flat and even, like recounting a long-forgotten event. Then what? He paused for a few seconds, eyes drifting to the room's corner. Then I lost control. No one spoke. The recorder's soft ticks filled the silence. What does lost controls mean, Jacob? Mendez asked, her voice lower, sharper. He rubbed his hands together, eyes vacant. I didn't mean to. I didn't plan anything. Just, she said something that made me angry. I remember yelling. Then he stopped, taking a deep breath. It all blurred. Mendez leaned forward, shifting her posture. What did you do to her? Jacob pursed his lips. He answered slowly. I don't know. I just remember blood on my hands. And I drove away. The room's air grew heavy. Mendez held his gaze while the prosecutor scribbled every word. Where did you drive? Toward the Franklin Mountains? There's a dirt road to an old quarry. I remember the wind was strong. I stopped. After that, I don't remember. You left her there? Jacob didn't answer. He stared at the tabletop, his fingers tapping rhythmically, unconsciously. Did you go back? No. He's avoided that road for 10 years. His voice dropped, each word deliberate. Then I thought the sand would bury it all. The desert always keeps secrets. Mendez stood abruptly, slamming her pen onto the table, the metallic clatter sharp and cold. No, Jacob. Nothing stays buried forever. Sand can hide a body, but it can't hide guilt. He sat still, meeting her gaze with tired eyes. I'm not a monster, he said. I just didn't stop in time. Mendez took a deep breath, trying to suppress the anger rising in her chest. You said she was hurt. You drove off. Then what? Did you go back? What did you do with her? Did you bury her? Jacob fell silent. Time stretched, filled only by the ticking clock and the scratch of her pen on the notepad. Mendez leaned forward, her voice hissing through clenched teeth. You owe her family an answer. 20 years they've waited. 20 years not knowing where their daughter is. They deserve to know. A bead of sweat rolled down his cheek. He swallowed hard, his eyes distant. I'm not sure what's left there anymore. Say it clearly. Sand and wind. I remember digging, but not deep. Maybe I was wrong. Mendez stared at him, her heart tightening. His voice was too calm, too detached. No tears, no remorse. Just a man describing an act, like a technical procedure. Did you have help? Jacob shook his head slightly. Just me. A long silence followed. Then Mendez slammed her hand on the table, the sound jolting Jacob slightly. Where's Melissa, Jacob? She shouted, her voice breaking in the cramped room. He didn't look at her, just closed his eyes and muttered, barely audible, like a whisper of wind. She's still there, where the sand meets the mountain. Mendez stood frozen. Outside, the Texas sun was rising, shining through the iron-barred window, casting pale golden light across the table, illuminating Jacob's cold face, a man who'd just admitted to taking a life, but hadn't yet revealed where she lay. The question, where's Melissa, hung in the room like an unhealing wound. The next morning, the El Paso sky was gray, the wind from the Franklin Mountains, blowing dry across the FBI office parking lot. Jacob Harlan had stayed awake all night in his cell. When Mendez entered, he sat upright, hands on the table, his gaze no longer evasive but cold, as if he'd made a decision. I want to talk to you, only you, he said, his voice hoarse. And I'll tell you where she is. Mendez sat down, pushing an old case file aside. He took a slow breath and began, unprompted. That night, I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to be quiet. but things got out of hand. He paused, staring at the narrow window in the wall. I drove north, along Trans Mountain, the old unpaved road. There was a broken power pole from a storm that year, about 3 miles off the main road. I stopped there. Mendez froze. The broken pole, a detail from the 2003 search team's topographic map, they hadn't had time to survey. Jacob continued, his voice steady, like reading a technical report. I remember an odd rock, shaped like an arrow pointing down. I used a shovel to dig. The wind was strong, the sand covered it fast. I buried her in a nylon tarp I had in the truck. I thought no one would find her. Mendez opened her notebook, writing every word. Can you draw a map? He nodded. A guard brought him a blank sheet of paper and a pencil. He bent over, sketching quickly, shaky but precise lines, a winding dirt road, a lightning bolt power symbol, an arrow-shaped rock, and a red X next to scrawled text, 1.8 miles off the highway, west of Franklin. When he looked up, the paper was dusted with graphite, the lines thin and trembling. He slid the map toward Mendez. You'll find her there, he said softly. If the sand hasn't swallowed it all. Without waiting, Mendez left the room. The map was scanned immediately, sent to the field team and the regional FBI office. An emergency investigation team of 12, El Paso PD, FBI evidence response team, and 2 K-9 units from New Mexico, was assembled within an hour. At 8 a.m., the convoy left downtown, heading toward the Franklin Mountains, where the wind whipped sand, and January temperatures still hit 80 degrees Fahrenheit. The area Jacob described was a desolate former mining route, now sealed off. Under a dry yellow sky, drones flew high to scan the terrain. From the control screen, a technician spotted a broken power pole leaning west, about 2 miles from Highway 375, exactly as mapped. When the team arrived, sand swirled in thick layers. A K-9 named Rex suddenly whined, sniffing around a large rock shaped like an arrow. Nearby, a slight depression in the ground looked freshly compacted. A technician marked it with orange spray paint, staking the scene. Dig, at coordinates 31 degree 53, 17.6, and 106 degree 27, 43.8. Mendez ordered over the radio. Shovels hit dry earth, sand scooped away slowly. No one spoke, only the howling wind and rhythmic metal clanks. After nearly 40 minutes, a shovel struck something hard, a dull thud. The team stopped. A tattered silver nylon tarp emerged, fraying at the touch. Beneath it, human bones, crossed and mixed with pale red sand. A forensic tech knelt, gloved, gently brushing away the remaining dirt. A small metal glint, a silver ring caked in dust. When cleaned, an engraving stood clear. MD. No one spoke. Mendez stood watching, her hair whipping in the wind, her eyes wet but tearless. 20 years, and the desert had finally given back the name it swallowed. The remains were processed under strict forensic protocol. Each bone, each fabric scrap was 3D photographed, sealed, labeled, and sent to the lab. Drones circled above, capturing the site from multiple angles. The initial report noted the bone structure matched an adult female, about 5'5", blood type O+, consistent with Melissa Duran's medical records. 3 days later, DNA from the jawbone matched a sample from Melissa's mother, 100% confirmed. That morning, Mendez brought the results envelope to Mrs. Duran's home. The frail woman opened the door, her hands trembling as she held the paper. Reading the final line, match probability, 99.999%. Identity confirmed Melissa Duran. She didn't cry, only whispered, "She's home." Outside, the El Paso sun blazed over the desert, lighting the Franklin Range, where desperate searches once unfolded. A police team erected a temporary wooden sign, Site D2003, Duran Recovery Area. That night, Mendez returned to the site. She sat by the arrow-shaped rock, holding an old photo of Melissa at graduation, smiling brightly in the wind. She placed it on the ground, near the spot once marked with a red X on the killer's map, and whispered, "We found you, Melissa." The desert kept its word. Somewhere far off, wind howled through broken power poles, carrying a long wail like a belated closure to 20 years of silence. And under the pale moonlight spilling over the Franklin Mountains, they say, if you listen closely, you can still hear a faint sound, the wind rustling through freshly uncovered sand, where Melissa Duran was finally named. The morning after the body was found, the area at the base of the Franklin Mountains was fully sealed off. Under harsh white sunlight, yellow FBI tape stretched across the desert, glinting in the wind. A federal forensic team from Quantico arrived overnight, bringing portable bone recovery equipment and an inert gas preservation chamber. They set up a temporary canopy, laid plastic flooring, and secured the site with steel stakes, as if working on the moon. Every grain of sand was evidence. Lead technician Dr. Laura Keene, who worked the 2010 Santa Fe excavation, directed the team through a three-phase protocol: survey, excavation, preservation. Everything was recorded in 360 degrees, scanned with LiDAR, to create a digital replica of the burial pit. The first sand layers were brushed away with stiff bristles, not shovels, to avoid damaging the structure. When they reached the silver nylon tarp, the body's outer wrapping, they cordoned off an extra meter radius to ensure no material was missed. A specialist sampled soil microbes, testing for decay. The sand beneath the nylon showed unusually high phosphate and nitrogen levels, typical of human tissue decomposition. After over 4 hours, the main bones, skull, pelvis, arms, were lifted, placed in foam-lined trays, and covered with polythene to block direct light. Each piece was numbered, DR01 to DR74. At the El Paso Forensic Lab, bone recovery and preservation began. Under electron microscopes, experts confirmed the bones had weathered for over 18 years, matching the estimated timeline. But what silenced the room was a distinct mark around the neck, a 3.4 mm deep, horizontal groove around cervical vertebrae C4 to C6, indicating death by mechanical strangulation. The report detailed tiny twisted fibers clung to the neck bones and jaw, their polymer structure matching one on rope made in Phoenix in the early 2000s. The same type found in Jacob Harlan's truck during a search. In a closed briefing, Dr. Keene told the team, "The fracture patterns show strong, consistent force, not accidental. No secondary trauma. She died on the spot, July 18, 2003. On the table, Mendez stared at a 3D reconstructed skull of Melissa, the jaw slightly tilted, neck bones fractured at sharp angles. No further explanation was needed. It was clear. Alongside bone analysis, evidence techs examined the nylon tarp. Under a microscope, they found faint imprints resembling a truck bed's edge, suggesting it was cut from a cargo cover. When compared to a partially torn tarp found in Jacob's garage, the match was exact. Forensic trace techs found 3 light brown hairs in a tarp knot, with Jacob's DNA on them, plus a female skin cell matching Melissa's. 2 genetic strands intertwined in a 0.2 milligram sample, undeniable proof. In the toxicology lab, they tested for sedatives or alcohol but found none. Melissa was fully conscious when strangled, the report concluded. No anesthetics, no major defensive wounds. The victim was likely surprised, attacked from behind. The 300-page forensic report, over an inch thick, included hundreds of site photos, gene charts, material analyses, and mechanical force simulations. Its final bolded line, cause of death, mechanical asphyxiation, via nylon ligature. Time of death, approximately 21 o'clock, 22 o'clock, July 18, 2003. Below, Dr. Laura Keene, signed, stamping it red. Confirmed by Federal Forensic Unit. On February 15, 2023, the Duran forensic report was filed in federal court. As the prosecutor presented it to the judge, he said one short, heavy sentence, "No doubt remains, she was murdered, on July 18, 2003. On the meeting room screen, a 3D reconstructed image of Melissa's face appeared. her gaze serene against a black background. Mendez stood silent, hand on the table's edge, hearing the wind through the glass. 20 years of pursuit, doubt, and waiting, now reduced to 3 stark words: mechanical asphyxiation, confirmed. As she left the room, the Franklin sky turned golden, sunlight slanting through dry palm fronds, casting long streaks on the desert ground. There, where a 27-year-old woman was once buried, the team placed a small stainless steel plaque. Melissa Duran. Found, identified, and never forgotten. Below, in smaller text, a quote from Dr. Keene's notes: "Sand can hide a body, but it can never hide the truth." In mid-March 2023, the Western District of Texas, El Paso Division Federal Courthouse, lit up early. A closed grand jury convened in courtroom 4B. No press, no public, just the prosecutor, court clerk, and 16 randomly selected federal jurors. On the table, a half-meter-thick file labeled United States vs. Jacob Harlan. Lead prosecutor, Alicia Moreno, a petite but famously tough Mexican-American, entered with a stack of documents. She'd led U.S. v. Thomas Bell, the 2015 Nobody murder case, and now faced a 20-year cold case revived by DNA tech. "We'll determine if there's enough to indict Jacob Harlan on 3 serious charges," she said, her voice clear, each word like a command. She opened a slide, projecting a photo of a silver Toyota Corolla found in 2003, alongside a desert map marking the body's location. The screen's light reflected on the 16 faces, thickening the room's air. On July 18, 2003, she began. Melissa Duran, 27, left her workplace and vanished. 20 years later, her body was found at the base of the Franklin Mountains, exactly where the suspect's hand-drawn map pointed. Evidence was presented methodically: crime scene photos, perfect match DNA, Jacob's map, the nylon rope from his truck, and the 300-page forensic report. Moreno pointed at the screen. "This is no longer a question. This is physical truth." She clicked to a DNA analysis. A green gene graph overlaid a red one. "This is DNA from the Toyota's door handle. This is from the suspect's toothbrush. They match 100% across 21 loci. Error probability, 1 in 2.4 quadrillion." A faint murmur rippled through the room. Moreno flipped to the next image. The silver ring engraved with MD, found in the grave. She didn't go anywhere. She was killed, and the killer hid her under sand for 2 decades. The one thing he didn't account for: DNA doesn't vanish. A witness was called, Lieutenant Carla Mendez, head of the cold case team. She recounted the entire pursuit, from recovering initial DNA, to genealogical tracing to the Harlan family, to collecting a soda can and toothbrush in Tucson. Her voice was low but firm, her gaze direct. "When we compared the samples, we knew only one person could have touched her car that night." After Mendez's testimony, Moreno played bodycam footage of Jacob's arrest. He was calm, unresisting, saying, "After 20 years, you still haven't forgotten." The words echoed in the closed room, chilling some jurors. Moreno turned to the board, writing 3 bold charges in capital letters. Kidnapping, resulting in death, 1st degree. Murder, tampering with physical evidence, she explained briefly. Each charge has independent legal grounding. Together, they form a complete federal offense, backed by DNA, voluntary statements, and physical evidence. A male juror, a retired teacher, asked, "Is there a direct confession?" Moreno nodded. He stated clearly in the interrogation transcript, "I stopped to talk to her. Then I lost control. No more needs to be said." Forensics proved she died by nylon rope strangulation, the same rope found in his truck. His words, plus the evidence, are an indirect but legally binding admission. She paused, scanning the room. "I'm not asking you to decide guilt. That's for trial. I'm asking you to confirm there's enough to indict, that Melissa Duran deserves to hear justice call her name, at least once." The room fell silent for minutes. A silver-haired woman, an old El Paso resident, nodded first. Then, one by one, hands rose. 15 of 16 jurors voted to indict Jacob Harlan on federal criminal charges. That afternoon, grand jury indictment number session, D-Tup, 23. 147 was announced. Jacob Edward Harlan, defendant, is hereby indicted on charges of kidnapping resulting in death, first-degree murder, and tampering with evidence in violation of United States Code, Title 18. Within an hour, the news leaked. El Paso media outlets blared, federal grand jury indicts suspect in 2003 Duran murder case. At the press conference, lead prosecutor Alicia Moreno spoke briefly. DNA evidence, the suspect's statements, his hand-drawn map, and physical evidence from the scene all point to one truth. This is no longer speculation or doubt. This is a first-degree murder case. She paused for a few seconds, then added, 20 years ago, Melissa Duran lost her life in silence. Today, that silence has been broken. At the back of the room, Lieutenant Mendez stood among a crowd of reporters. Camera flashes lit up around her. For a moment, she glanced at the courthouse's electronic display, United States First Jacob Harlan, and knew her journey wasn't over, but for the first time, justice had a shape, a name, and someone held accountable. In August 2023, the El Paso Federal Courthouse was packed. From early morning, reporters and locals lined the main hallway, TV cameras positioned by the iron gates. After 20 years, the case once buried under Franklin's sand was now the focus of all Texas. The electronic board outside the lobby read, United States First Jacob Harlan, criminal case number 23-147. Jacob was brought in wearing a pale blue shirt, hands cuffed, his face eerily calm. He scanned the crowd of reporters with blank eyes, neither raising nor lowering his head. As he passed through security, cameras clicked like a swarm of bees. At the end of the spectator rows, Melissa Duran's mother sat silently, clutching her daughter's old woolen scarf. For the prosecution, Alicia Moreno, lead federal prosecutor, headed a team of 5. Opposite, defense attorney Thomas Kepler, a veteran expert in data privacy law, known for planting reasonable doubt in jurors' minds. Judge Samuel O'Reilly presided. He opened briefly, his voice gravelly, "This is a landmark case, not just for the time past, but because technology has brought the past back. The 12 jurors, your duty is to determine, is the defendant guilty, based on evidence and reason, not emotion." The trial began. Moreno opened with slides, tracing the 20-year investigation. Images marked milestones: the silver Toyota Corolla, the 2003 Franklin desert scene, the dust-covered Duran case 2003 evidence box in storage, then the green glow of the 2020 DNA lab where old samples were retested. 20 years ago, technology couldn't give Melissa a voice, she said, but DNA doesn't lie, and justice has no statute of limitations. She clicked, displaying a gene graph. This is the DNA from the car door handle. This is from a toothbrush collected in Tucson. They match perfectly. Odds of error, 1 in 7 billion. Moreno turned to the jury. 7 billion. That's more than the planet's population. This only happens if the universe decides to mock justice, and we all know it doesn't mock anyone. The courtroom was silent. Next, Lieutenant Carla Mendez took the witness stand. She recounted the journey, recovering the case file, sending DNA to Othram Labs, tracing the Harlan family, tracking Jacob, collecting a soda can and toothbrush, and the Tucson arrest. As the body cam video played, Jacob's voice rang clear. After 20 years, you still haven't forgotten, Mendez continued. He said that when cuffed, I think it wasn't just a question, it was a confession. Forensic expert Dr. Laura Keene testified next. She presented neck bone photos, a 3D model, and excerpts from the 300-page report, Cause of Death, Mechanical Asphyxiation via Nylon Ligature. Showing the nylon rope from Jacob's truck, she explained, the polymer structure, double twist pattern, and plastic core impurities matched the rope around the victim's neck. Every molecule speaks what he never fully admitted. A female juror closed her eyes, perhaps to avoid the vivid crime scene images. Then defense attorney Thomas Kepler countered. He walked slowly to the stand, his voice smooth as jazz. Ladies and gentlemen, the government's forensic genealogy is a double-edged sword. It relies on private citizens' voluntarily uploaded data, and the government accessed it to find a suspect. This isn't just a murder case. It's a question: do we have privacy in our own blood? He turned, lightly touching Jacob's shoulder. My client doesn't deny knowing the victim. But DNA's presence doesn't equal guilt. He may have helped her, touched the car, and then someone else was the real killer. The prosecution objected immediately, but the judge allowed Kepler to continue. Kepler pressed, "Do you believe, after 20 years, a hair or skin cell can't be cross-contaminated?" The police collected samples from a trash can, without an official DNA warrant. The entire evidence chain rests on an assumption that technicians don't make mistakes. But we're all human. He paused, eyeing each juror, his voice low. And when a human can err, we must choose doubt. That's justice. The room's atmosphere shifted. Mendez glanced at Moreno, their eyes calm. Moreno stood, requesting an immediate rebuttal. She stepped to the stand, her voice ringing. No one violated anyone's privacy. All genealogical data was voluntarily provided by the suspect's relatives. They didn't know their blood held the key to redeeming a lost soul. And that's noble, not a violation. She pointed to the board. We have DNA, his hand-drawn map, his statement I lost control. The nylon rope, the MD engraved ring, the forensic report, and arrest footage. If that's not enough, I ask you, what more evidence do we need? A desert wind, whispering he's guilty. Moreno paused, staring at the jury. No, we don't need the desert to answer. Science has already spoken. The trial lasted 10 days. Every session was packed, with hundreds watching online. Texas media dubbed it the trial of the desert ghost. In her closing argument, Moreno spoke for 7 minutes. She didn't read lengthy notes, just held Melissa's graduation photo and placed it on the stand. This is the woman justice forgot for 20 years. Now I ask you to bring her back. Judge O'Reilly recited the charges: kidnapping resulting in death, first-degree murder, tampering with evidence. The jury left to deliberate at 3:05 p.m. 3 hours later, at 6:10 p.m., they returned. No one met each other's eyes, faces heavy. The clerk stood. Has the jury reached a verdict? The forewoman, a silver-haired woman, nodded, her voice trembling. We have, Your Honor. We, the jury, find the defendant, Jacob Edward Harlan, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, then fell silent. Jacob's expression didn't change. He stared ahead, lips pursed, eyes empty. Mendez, in the back row, exhaled, hands clasped. She felt no joy, only a lingering emptiness. For though justice was served, nothing could restore Melissa Duran's lost time. Moreno bowed her head, gathering her files, and whispered, 20 years, and the desert finally spoke. Outside, dusk fell over El Paso, light staining the Franklin Range red, like a final curtain on a dark chapter once buried by time. Now justice had a shape, a name, and a verdict. On September 14, 2023, the El Paso Federal Courthouse was packed again. No more startled media lenses, no more local chatter. Today was sentencing day. On the bench, Judge Samuel O'Reilly sat sternly, his silver hair catching the ceiling light. The air felt thick, like sealed glass, broken only by the hum of a fan and the rustle of the clerk's papers. Jacob Harlan was led in, hands cuffed, in a dark orange prison jumpsuit. He was visibly thinner, stubble on his face, eyes sunken. Yet his eerie calm remained, the tranquility of someone long prepared for this day. For the prosecution, Alicia Moreno arranged her files. Opposite, Thomas Kepler sat still, his face guarded. In the spectator rows, Lieutenant Carla Mendez sat beside Melissa's mother. The two women silent, staring ahead. Judge O'Reilly began, his voice steady as a tolling bell. After the jury found defendant Jacob Edward Harlan guilty of kidnapping, resulting in death, first-degree murder, and tampering with evidence, today the court pronounces sentencing. He paused, glancing at the file, over 2 fingers thick. Before sentencing, the court allows the victim's representative to speak. Rosa Duran, Melissa's mother, stood, frail and trembling. Her voice was clear and steady. "I've waited 20 years for this day. 20 years staring at an empty door. 20 years hearing a phone that never answered. I don't hate you, Mr. Harlan. I just want you to know my daughter believed people could help each other in the desert, and that belief killed her. I hope you remember that every morning you wake in your cell." The courtroom was silent. A man in the back bowed his head, eyes red. As she sat, the judge nodded, then turned to Jacob. "Does the defendant have final words before sentencing?" Jacob stood, hands cuffed. He scanned the room, every eye on him. His voice was hoarse, slow, neither justifying nor pleading. "I've been waiting for this day. Now, I can sleep." A sharp exhale echoed from the back, not pity, but the exhaustion of all, a 2-decade weight of buried truth. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, his voice firm. "The court, in the name of the United States, sentences defendant Jacob Edward Harlan to life imprisonment without parole for first-degree murder, with concurrent sentences for kidnapping resulting in death and tampering with evidence. The defendant will serve at ADX Florence, Colorado. No parole, no consideration for release." The gavel struck 3 times, echoing like a final punctuation to 20 years of pursuit. Moreno bowed her head, closing her files, lips tight. Mendez sat still, clutching Melissa's photo. In it, the young woman smiled brightly, hair fluttering in the wind. A stolen moment gone forever. Marshals stepped forward. "Jacob Harlan, move." He didn't resist. As he was let out, he glanced back briefly, his eyes lingering on Melissa's photo on the table before Mendez. For a moment, his face flickered, not quite regret, but a vague sorrow, as if seeing his own youth locked in that light. The steel door closed behind him. The lock's clank echoed down the hall. Then, only silence remained. Outside, El Paso's sky was dusty. Wind swirled through the Franklin Range, whistling past the courthouse fence, carrying the scent of sand and metal. Reporters waited in the courtyard. As Mendez stepped out, flashes blazed. One asked, "Lieutenant, do you think justice has been served?" She paused, gazing toward the mountains where dusk glowed red. Her voice was low but firm. "Justice comes late, but never lost. Justice delayed, but not denied." That evening, El Paso TV opened its broadcast with the courthouse door closing and text scrolling, "Justice delayed, but not denied." The next image showed Mendez holding Melissa's photo as she passed the courthouse gate, wine-tossing her hair, the desert sunset behind. In federal prison, Jacob Harlan was placed in solitary cell 218. The sentence read, "No parole, no visitation without federal approval." He sat on the cot, dim light casting shadows on his pale face. For the first time in years, he closed his eyes for long. No more running, no more fearing a knock in the night. In El Paso, Rosa Duran lit a small candle on her porch. Mendez stood beside her, silent. The flame flickered, reflecting on Melissa's photo between them. "She'll rest now," Rosa whispered. Beyond, the desert wind blew through Franklin's dunes. Where a young woman was once buried, a stone marker now stood, engraved in silver, Melissa Duran, 1976. 2003. Found, named, remembered. 20 years later, El Paso could finally breathe again. In the red-tinged dusk of West Texas, they say when the wind shifts through the Franklin Range, the sand whispering against rocks sounds like a soft murmur. Justice delayed, but not denied. On the morning of September 10, 2023, El Paso shone bright but quieter than usual. Under a clear sky, desert wind blew gently like a breath. At Restlawn Cemetery, north of the city, hundreds gathered around a freshly dug plot, where a small oak coffin rested on a white-draped platform. 20 years after a girl vanished in the Franklin Mountains, Melissa Duran was finally home. No funeral music played. No TV cameras. Just the wind rustling through dry palms, sand whispering on stone. Attendees, police, investigators, forensic staff, 2003 search volunteers, and strangers who never knew Melissa stood in a silent circle. All shared one feeling, closure, but not quite peace. Lieutenant Carla Mendez stepped slowly to the coffin, holding white daisies. Beside her was Rosa Duran, Melissa's mother, her hair fully silver in just months. In her hand was a gold earring, the only item found intact in Franklin's sand. She placed it gently on the coffin lid, whispering, "I kept this place for you long enough. Now you can rest." The wind swirled, lifting her hair lightly, as if in reply. In the back, veteran investigators stood silent. Major Robert Salinas, now over 70, leaned on a cane, eyes red. He'd led the 2003 search, signing the order to label the case. Cold, seeing Mendez, they only nodded. No words needed. A priest read a brief scripture. No one cried aloud, only soft, broken breaths. As the coffin lowered, a sudden gust swept up, carrying red dust from Trans Mountain Highway. It settled lightly on the new stone, etched in silver, Melissa Duran, 1976, 2003. Finally home. The simple words silenced the cemetery. Mendez felt her throat tighten. 20 years, hundreds of reports, thousands of hours searching, all distilled into those 4 words. After the burial, the crowd moved to a small plot by Reslawn Memorial Hall, where El Paso police erected a temporary stainless steel memorial, nearly 2 meters tall, inscribed, "In memory of the missing, for every name still waiting to be found." Below listed 47 unresolved missing persons cases from the past 30 years along the Texas-New Mexico border. Melissa Duran's name was first, distinct. Behind it, a small asterisk and note, "Recovered, 2023. As the white cloth was pulled from the memorial, light, hesitant applause rippled, then spread like a small wave, not joy, but gratitude, for persistence, science, and belief. No case truly dies. A local TV reporter, the only one allowed to film, asked Mendez afterward, "Do you think justice was truly served?" She looked toward the Franklin Range, where sunlight streaked the desert gold. "Justice doesn't erase loss," she said softly, "but it keeps memory from being alone." By noon, as the crowd thinned, Mendez returned to the grave alone. She placed her faded silver police badge, her first, from joining the force in 2001, when Melissa was alive, on the stone, whispering, "We never forgot, Melissa. You taught us, time can't hide truth." In the distance, young police cadets helped clear chairs and cover the new memorial. One, about 20, studied the engraved names and asked, "Lieutenant, do you think we'll find them all?" Mendez smiled faintly, eyes distant. "Not all, but each one found makes the world a little brighter." She glanced back at the finally home, stone, sunlight pooling in warm streaks. The desert wind rose, dusting the inscription red, then carrying it away, as if Franklin itself sighed, consoling a soul, returned after 2 decades of wandering. That evening, El Paso TV replayed a short burial segment, intercutting the gold earring and MD engraved ring side by side. The broadcast closed with scrolling text, "After 20 years, the desert kept its promise." In her small East Side home, Rosa Duran lit a candle under her daughter's framed photo. The dim light reflected Melissa's gentle smile. Rosa sat still, her trembling hand touching the glass. Far off, a train whistle blended with the night wind, a long farewell. Atop Franklin, where the broken power pole still leaned, a new warning sign stood, "Duran Site, Protected Area by El Paso PD." At its base, someone had placed wild daisies and a handwritten note, "For Melissa, and for those still lost in the wind." Night wind flipped the paper, lifting it, carrying red sand mixed with moonlight. Below, in the valley, El Paso fell still, as if the city took one deep, heavy, yet relieved breath, for at last, Melissa Duran was home. The story of Melissa Duran is not just a two-decade case solved, it's a mirror reflecting today's American society, where technology, justice, and morality coexist in a complex world. When Lieutenant Carla Mendez used forensic genealogy to first trace DNA on the car door handle, it showed science isn't just a tool, but a bridge between humanity and truths buried by time. In a country with over 600,000 missing persons reported yearly, the Duran case reminds us that closing a file doesn't end the story. Technology linked past to present, but persistence, dedication, and compassion turned data into justice. From the dim lights of Montana Avenue in 2003 to Mendez standing silent in the Franklin Desert in 2023, we see silence can be more dangerous than evil. In modern America, where information floods and trust erodes, this story urges us to notice the smallest things: an unanswered call, a neighbor suddenly gone. Justice doesn't come from luck, but from those who dare to dig deep enough. The Duran case's lesson isn't just for police, it's for every American in this age of technology and data. Use knowledge to light the dark, but never let the human heart be forgotten amid cold numbers. As Mendez said, no one vanishes forever, we just haven't dug deep enough. Thank you for joining us in the journey to reclaim justice for Melissa Duran, where a truth, buried for 2 decades, finally rose from the desert sand. Please subscribe to follow more cold case stories, where every small clue can light up a forgotten soul.